everyone. In this video, I'll be talking a little bit about running and running form, but first, I'm gonna go over how running works and a few other things to keep in mind for beginning runners. So to start off, let's talk about what running even is. We're living in a world where gravity is pulling on all of us in a downward direction towards the center of the earth. No surprise to anyone. Luckily for us, we have bones, muscles, and nerves that allow us to counteract the force of gravity to some extent with our skeletal system. Our muscles pull on our bones in such a way that allows them to stand up even though gravity is pulling our bodies in the opposite direction. So when we stand, in order to keep ourselves balanced, we need to keep our center of mass above what's called our base of support. So let me explain a few terms here. The center of mass is the center of where you carry your weight. It's the point at which if you weighed all the different parts of your body, then drew a line exactly where half of your mass is on one side of your body and half of your mass is on the other side of that line. And then you make it three-dimensional. You do the same thing for height, you do the same thing for width, and you do the same thing for length. So the center of mass is the point at which all of those lines intersect. So if you had the exact center of mass of someone, you could lay them across the middle of a teeter-totter and they would be perfectly balanced any way you orient them. Now the funny thing about center of mass is this: it's always changing. If that person on the teeter-totter raises their hands above their head instead of keeping them at their side, their center of mass will move up to a slightly higher place in their body and they won't be balanced anymore. So that's what I mean when I say center of mass. And for reference, for most people, most of the time, it's usually really close to your hips. Now the other term I want to share is called base of support. And all I mean when I say base of support is the area that's touching the ground and bearing your weight when you're standing. So if you draw a line that encompasses both of your feet, the area of the circle is your base of support. If you have your feet close together, you have a smaller base of support, and if you have your feet wider apart, your base of support is bigger. So now that you know those terms, I'm gonna share this again. In order to be balanced, you have to have your center of mass over your base of support. That makes a lot of sense. If I lean too far forward, my center of mass is moving beyond the plane of my base of support, and I'll fall. Interestingly, that is exactly what's happening when we run. In fact, this is the basic principle that allows us to move at all. It's the same for walking, it's the same for crawling, for rolling. We're moving our center of mass outside of our base of support. We start to fall, and then we catch ourselves. Now with running, this is happening really fast, maybe several times per second, and each step we're catching ourselves and then pushing our center of mass forward so that we can fall again. So the reason I'm giving you this lecture on physics and biomechanics, though, is because all of this is really important to understand if you want to understand good running form. When you run, the best form is to have a slight forward lean. In most cases, it's so subtle that you may not even notice it. If you're running faster, you can have a more aggressive angle forward, and if you're running slower, you should have a less aggressive angle. Again, this lean is important because it's the motor that keeps you moving forward. How fast you go is determined in large part by how far your center of mass is forward from your base of support, which in turn determines how fast you'll fall. Now when we run, oftentimes people like to take big steps that reach out way ahead of them. But if you think about it, taking steps where your foot lands far in front of you is like driving with your e-brake still on. You're working against yourself. Remember that your forward lean is like the motor for your running. If you take a step that's way out in front of you, you're stopping the forward fall, making it so that you have to spend more energy to go the same pace. The better thing to do is land where your foot is almost directly underneath your center of mass. That way the momentum and the force of your fall will keep carrying you forward. Now at the end of the day, your foot will almost always be slightly ahead of your center of mass because there is some momentum that you have to control from the previous steps. But thinking about getting your foot underneath you is a good way to approach that. Now it's actually good to take a step with your leg moving far in front of you as you swing it. This helps keep your momentum going for your feet, and it's actually a natural part of running. But when your foot hits the ground, it's important that it's hitting the ground almost underneath you. Another important aspect of form is to have good posture as you run. It may sound simple, but look up, keep your back straight, stand up tall. It's a big temptation to drop your head, look at your feet, that type of thing. But keeping a good posture will help you to avoid pain and injuries, and it'll likely help you to even run faster. Another thing you should do is pay attention to your arms. When we walk or when we run, we have reciprocal motion with our arms and legs. So when my left foot goes forward, my right arm is swinging forward too, and vice versa. Most people do this naturally, but if for some reason that isn't a natural thing for you, train to develop that habit. It's an important part of the running motion. As you swing your arms, try to have your arms compact with your elbows bent. Don't tighten your shoulders, keep your shoulders loose and relaxed, but have your elbows bent. This makes the arm swing a little bit easier. But also standing tall and having your elbows bent at your side brings your center of mass up a little higher, which gives you a little bit of mechanical advantage for that falling forward motion, which we were talking about earlier, which is the propeller to move you forward. It's kind of like having a more powerful engine when you have that center of mass up higher, so there's less effort required for more power. There's a ton that we could talk about with running form, but I just want to talk about one other thing for this beginner video, and that is the cadence of your steps. Cadence just means how many steps you take in a minute. There was a study done a while ago that measured the cadence of elite athletes. They found a huge number of very elite runners had a cadence of around 170 to 180 steps per minute. So a lot of people have the idea that 170 to 180 steps per minute is the ideal, and there's a little controversy about whether 180 beats per minute is good for everyone, but there has been some really great evidence that says that increasing your cadence by a few beats per minute can make a big difference in helping your form improve and helping you avoid injuries. So while this is not for everyone, it can be a nice tool to help you improve your form or decrease pain that you're feeling as you run. The way to measure this is you find a pace that's comfortable for you and you set a timer for a minute while you count how many times your foot hits the ground. Again, the amount of steps you take in a minute is your cadence, and you can use that information as you train. A great way to train yourself to increase your cadence is to use a metronome and listen as you run, or if you're not a weirdo who likes listening to metronomes while you run, find a song with a beat of 180 beats per minute, or whatever cadence you personally are shooting for, and that might be a little easier to listen to. There's actually a lot of playlists that are compiled by the cadence of the song, so if you want to run 160 steps per minute, look up a playlist, 160 steps per minute, and that way you can just run to the rhythm of the songs that are playing. As you try to increase your cadence, you may find that it's overwhelming to try to run at a new pace. And let me say, I only really recommend increasing your cadence by 2 to 5 steps per minute at a time. Anything more than that can actually have a detrimental effect on your running. So get used to a pace and make sure it's really comfortable before you try to increase it again. It could take weeks or months of consistency before you feel natural at a new cadence, so don't bite off more than you can chew by jumping up more than 5 or so steps per minute. If/when you increase your cadence, keep in mind it's totally okay to have a shorter stride length. In fact, the distance of the steps you take will probably decrease as you increase the cadence of your steps, and that's totally okay. It actually can be one of the things that's helping you avoid injuries. So those are my tips on running form for a beginner runner. If you're just starting, it may be a good idea to run on a treadmill and video yourself from the side and from the front so you can see what your running form looks like. This allows you to analyze your running form a little bit and be more honest in the way you approach that. And before I end this video, just remember, everyone has a slightly different running pattern, and your pattern is always going to be unique to you. That's a good thing because your body is different than anyone else's. But these are little commonalities that will help you find your particular gait pattern and make it more efficient. These aspects of your form won't come all at once, but the goal is to work on them and make them habits. The goal is to make these things feel more natural. Over time, if you work on them consistently, they'll just become a part of how you run. So, I hope this was helpful. In the next video, I'll be talking about how to apply these concepts in the scope of your greater running plan. So I will see you in the next video.